like you've done the reading, so I'd like you to go to that side. This group here, or maybe you two can go to that side because you look like you've done the reading. You two look like, maybe you've done the reading, so go to that side. And can I have the last three? How have we got? 4? Oh, Sarah, can you go to that side, please? Need to even up. And Kirsty and Nat, can you go to that side? Alright, standing up, we're going to make a little line because we're going to physically close the gap through the quiz, and the first one's the middle part. Okay, you ready for the first question? Professor Mick Dodson outlines how Australia needs to invest in 2 major things to assist in closing the gap. What are they? This is a real good test to see who's done the reading. I can see a few people who haven't done the reading. Education's one.
Employment. Health.
Not employment. What are we? What are we?
Teacher. Educators.
Thank you. Well done. Alright. That side can take a step in. Big one, massively. I haven't done the reading on this side. Jeez. Okay, next question. What are the 6 objectives listed in the Closing the Gap policy? Think.
Maybe just
Keep, even if you do, yeah, maybe just this side.
Is that building blocks?
No, not building blocks. These are the objectives. So what do they want to achieve?
Oh,
Don't worry about this group, they don't know what they're doing.
Same life expectancy, and
Yes.
then reduce infant mortality.
Yes.
Ensure that all 4-year-olds have an opportunity to
Yes.
have an education.
They're hard.
Make the educational outcomes the same. So make the same number of people leaving and continue to 12.
Yeah, we'll put them up. So close the life expectancy, we have that. Halving the gap in mortality rates, we have that one. Ensure Indigenous 4-year-olds in remote communities have access to early childhood, we have that one. Halving the gap for Indigenous students in reading and writing, which we have, literacy and numeracy. Halving the gap for Indigenous students in Year 12 attainment, so yes, we have that one. And halving the gap in employment outcomes between Indigenous and non-Indigenous within a decade. Well done, that's right, everybody. Doing so well. Alright, next one. To achieve the closing the gap objectives, 7 building blocks have been identified. What are they? Sorry about these people.
Government and education, leadership, schooling, early childhood, health, employment,
Enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say safe communities?
Yes.
Yes. Come up. Yeah, also
Participation.
governance and leadership. So, after reading the Dodson article to the front class, you've already done it, do you think the Closing the Gap policy has made a difference to lives of Indigenous people? Why or why not? Have you seen this making a difference to Indigenous people's lives? Did you know what it was before this course? I didn't.
You're being disruptive.
Yeah, just a little bit. Shh. Learning. It's never seen you. Do you think?
There is a long way to go.
Yeah, it's
It's
like
still-
yeah.
You wrote a pretty good article. Okay, next question. So fill in the blanks with stable. Just move so you can see.
Must be that side's turned right.
Well, I don't know anything though. Our starting point must be to envision children with something, imagination, culture, and something, desires, expectations for their lives. This is a direct quote, and I thought it was quite a good quote from what he was talking about.
Not curiosity.
Not curiosity. Starts with an I.
Imagination. Oh,
I think it's an I. Should we put them up? Do you know what that culture and that next one is? Culture and
Intelligence.
Values.
oh.
They might not have done their reading.
They might not. They seem to have done very well though. Okay, next question. This is the last question. What are some of the important? What are some of the implications to teaching Indigenous students mathematics? This is from the second reading, all about teaching children mathematics. Did you do that reading?
Isn't the one that he said that it's not relevant?
Yes, that's one of the reasons. What's their differing worldviews? Do you want to have a go?
I don't believe it. Yeah, because they're not materialistic. They're not like, it's not capitalism.
Yeah, we'll put the answer up. So they have differing worldviews. So is it relevant to their life to know what 2 times 2 is? Not really, because they're people of the land. So the last bit, effective teachers will make connections to what is already known to teach Western mathematical concepts. So something you need to keep in mind when you're teaching that if you're in a remote or rural community. All right, this group. How did you feel when I treated you like that? Like you know nothing.
Dumb.
Can you imagine what that's like for some Indigenous people in your classroom when you have that already expectation that they haven't done the work anyway, why would they even bother asking you?
Yeah, because we can't, well, I didn't do the reading, but then I kind of still thought that I could have answered. Not all of the questions, but some of them. But you just said no, so okay.
If they get that from the time that they go to uni to the time that they go to, why would they go to year 12 if that is what they've experienced? Every single teacher does that to them. They have, even like, you don't even have to say it to them, it's the way you can carry yourself, like, not even, I wasn't even going to look at you or ask you, and that just my non-body language towards you was like, why would I even bother with you? Anyway, I'm going to hand you over to Yvette, you can also jump, go on.
Thank you everyone for doing that experiment. And first of all, would just like to show and respect and acknowledge the Noongar and local Whadjuk people of elders past and present who are the traditional custodians of this land. So, closing the gap. What is it? Well, the definition in Australia, it marks the difference between the lives of Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And closing the gap is introduced by the Rudd government in 2008 and has an overarching framework consisting of Indigenous affairs. The gap does exist with virtually every aspect of Indigenous people's existence, and closing the gap on Indigenous advantage is a central commitment to the Council of Australian Governments. In terms of Indigenous wellbeing overall, in the last 20 years, there's been new policies coming and going all the time, but there isn't really much to celebrate. Not a lot has really changed. And looking at statistics, there is still significant gaps, like I said, in every aspect of existence between the Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, and this is throughout all states in Australia. Closing the gap is a framework, and it has goals and measures put in place to support Indigenous affairs, and it's closely monitored through reports by the federal government. Some people support the ideas and measures put into place, and others believe that it does not address the real gap, which is the power difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and mainstream society. Government policies alone cannot close the gap, and there does need to be a real energy of change amongst Indigenous people and their families themselves. So background information, 6 identified objectives that we've just gone through. The reason why these are the 6 is because life expectancy between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, still quite shocking to think that for men there's 11.5 years difference for their life expectancy, and for women it's 9.7 years. And with Indigenous children under the age of 5, they are 3 times more likely to die from curable illness, disease, accidents than non-Indigenous, and 83% of these deaths are actually in the first year of their lives. With schooling, well, roughly 86% of non-Indigenous children finish high school, with only 43% of non-Indigenous children finishing their formal schooling. 48% of Indigenous people are employed, and 72% of non-Indigenous people are employed. So that's a huge gap as well. Can anyone think of any ways for these objectives? So let's just say with the 4-year-old programs, can anyone think of ways that they could try and close the gap in their classroom with links to education and healthcare? Has anyone got any ideas that they may be able to put in place?
That low sit crunch thing to
Yeah.
help stop ear
Mm-hmm.
issues. Yeah.
You could have like breakfast club in your school, so all the kids get their breakfast and get their healthy nutrition.
Yeah. Anyone else?
At my old prep, they actually bus the children into the school, so they pick them up at their homes and then take them to school.
Yeah. Brilliant. All great ideas. And and as mentioned earlier, these are the 7 building blocks. So early childhood, schooling, health, economic participation, healthy homes, safe communities, and government leadership. And if you look at these building blocks from what we are soon going to be a teacher's point of perspective, early childhood directly links to us, so we can play an important role. Schooling, obviously, we're going to be in a school or educational environment, so we could also advocate to other education, people in education or schools to share our knowledge of what we can do. Health, we can link that into our classroom curriculum, also with healthy homes, and also communities as well. So, yeah. Now I will pass you to Shay.
Alright, I have a quick video on the Aboriginal Health Service.
Yeah, this is where we need to be as a nation. We need to walk hand in hand.
One of the challenges is always going to be getting it right at the local level, listening to the different needs at local areas. Like it's not about having one size fits all.
Businesses play a pivotal role in improving the health of their local communities. They're central points for Aboriginal people to come to. They're a place where Aboriginal people feel safe, where we know we're going to be respected, and where we know we're going to get the treatment that we need. So we play a pivotal role in being a point of access for a range of services, particularly with effective partnerships. One of our most important partnerships is the partnership we have with our local pharmacies under the HUMAX program. Aboriginal patients are able to come to Gallavilla, get a script that's annotated with CTG for the Close the Gap. They take that script down to a participating pharmacy and they're able to obtain either subsidised or free medication. And that's been absolutely essential in closing the gap because that's been well known for a long time. Without the ability to afford medication, Aboriginal people have been getting scripts and been going home and they haven't been getting those filled.
It's not about us as a mainstream health service going into a community and saying, this is what we want you to do. It's about, let's work together. I think the supporters of the Close the Gap campaign are the ones that make the difference. They're the ones that have brought this to the attention of the rest of the nation. We can only do it if we walk hand in hand, side by side. We as a nation can do it. Let's do it.
Alright, so as you can see, they are putting into place different things to help with the Aboriginal medical service. So all state government have shown that they have a strong interest in helping with it, and you'll find that most or all state funded hospitals will have an Aboriginal liaison, and they are required to give special attention to the needs of Aboriginal students to ensure services are provided in a culturally appropriate manner. So all of this is to find new ways to help and make Aboriginal health better in rural and in urban. And state government funds various high priority projects that are aimed at improving the health of Aboriginal families, disease prevention in Aboriginal people, environmental health in Aboriginal communities, nutrition and substance abuse. That's all I have on that one.
So Shay was just talking about a few things that they are putting in place health-wise. Health and education are two things that play a huge role in closing the gap. But as I said, there's a lot of controversy in what people think about closing the gap. Some people look at these policies and think, great, this is going to fix everything. Other people look at these policies and think, this is just another cover-up by the government. There's more things need to be put in place, and there needs to be more empowerment for Indigenous people for these things to really happen. This is mine. I've known her my whole life. This is Louise. She identifies herself as Indigenous. Her mother is not Indigenous. Her father is Indigenous. Throughout her schooling, from year 1 to year 12, she received tutoring, so homework support, basically anything she needed to help her education, she received. She said this was a really great thing for her, but also she had friends, not Indigenous, who were struggling at school, but they came from a low socioeconomic background, so they weren't getting the support. So you've got to look at, hang on a minute, is this right to say, well, you're an Indigenous student, so we're going to give you all the help and support you need, and those non-Indigenous children, well, your parents need to go pay for tutoring. Something to think about. I'm not saying that the closing the gap policies aren't helping, but giving some children something and other children not the same support, you know, it goes both ways. And she was actually saying for her, she has quite pale skin. People used to always ask her, excuse me, are you in the right class? And for her, it was like a real identity crisis. She said when she was 13, she was so confused with, am I Indigenous, am I non-Indigenous? I get to do all these programs, yet I have people questioning me all the time. And she said that it felt like it just reinforced this us and them. So all of the children that were in her class were like, okay, now you're one of us. So I guess putting Louise into this presentation, I just wanted you guys to sort of open your mind and think about it on a broader perspective as well for Indigenous people. And even Louise says herself, you know, racism does go both ways, and unfortunately many Indigenous children have their minds made up and it is passed through families. And many Indigenous children are also ashamed of their Aboriginality because of the stigma attached. So I think for someone with her background, you know, even making these comments, it just reinforces and I guess reinforces the importance of, as teachers, we need to teach the Indigenous culture. So our children, the children in our classroom become culturally competent as well. Because in education, it's not just about putting policies in place to, I guess, almost apologise for things that have been done in the past. It's creating a new change for our students, so they also treat the children, Indigenous children in their class with just the same respect and dignity as they would everyone else. And effective education must have meaning to children's culture, connect to real life, and all experience need to have a real sense of purpose. So that's just something I wanted to share with you for something to think about.
As you know, there are many policies that have been put into place. If you think back to the beginning of the 1900s, policies weren't as nice to the Aboriginal people as it is now, I guess, and so we've improved a lot. So what the COI, or the Council of Australian Government, have done, I think it was in 2008, they put forward 6 ambitious targets, which we've heard a lot about today already, but I'm going to read them anyway. So to close the gap in life expectancy within a generation by 2031, halve the gap in mortality rates for Indigenous children by 2018, ensure access to early childhood education for all Indigenous 4-year-olds in remote communities by 2013, halve the gap in reading, writing and numeracy achievements by 2018, halve the gap for Indigenous students in Year 12 attainment rates by 2020, and halve the gap in employment outcomes between Indigenous and other Australians by 2018. Now, the one that's this year, so ensuring access to early childhood education for all 4-year-old Indigenous students in remote communities, I haven't actually found any evidence that they have achieved this goal yet. I suppose we'll have to wait to the next census to find out, but we do know throughout our units and throughout our unit studies that we've seen that remote communities are getting a lot more resources and things from the government. They are getting provided for more. And I think today in the lecture she mentioned how they've ensured that there are places for all early childhood Indigenous students in remote communities. Whether or not they're actually all going, I don't know yet. We'll have to wait and find out. Although, even if the census does come, do you really think the government will actually share the information if they haven't achieved that goal? So we don't know. But with these policies, and I mean, it may be great for their education and health and all that sort of thing and employment, but is it actually creating a bigger gap socially? Is it really creating a bigger gap between our relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people? Because the non-Indigenous might think that, and this is just generalising, not everyone thinks this, but they might be thinking that they're getting all these handouts, whereas the Indigenous may think that the government is belittling them and saying that you need our help. So really it could just be creating a bigger gap rather than actually closing the gap. Next. So one great thing though is it's all started with an apology. So we do know that the government has made a lot of mistakes in the past, like we've heard about all those policies, which obviously weren't very nice. And in 2008, the Labor Australian government, they made a public apology to the Indigenous Australians for the mistreatment and particularly for the stolen generation. And the aim of this apology was to try and bridge that gap with our relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And they actually, with this apology, they put policies into place to provide more for Indigenous Australians. And so including in 2011, the National History curriculum was made to include the stolen generation's history, so we're actually required to teach children about the mistreatment that happened in the past, and so this will help them gain that empathy for Indigenous Australians, maybe even become more culturally competent. And so in 2008, the Sorry Day was told to be held annually on the 26th of May. And yeah,
Alright, with closing the gap comes cultural competency, which we've done a lot on, so I won't go into too much detail. But the National Centre of Cultural Competence has identified 5 key components of cultural competence, which are valuing of cultural diversity, conducting a cultural self-assessment, managing the dynamics of difference, acquiring and institutionalising cultural knowledge, and adapting to diversity and cultural context. So pretty much closing the gap, you're going to have a lot of cultural competency and know the differences and how to bring it together instead of going, well, that's them, that's us. So just understanding them. Going on. Yeah.
I'm Christy, and I'm going to give you a bit of a personal kind of view on the whole thing. This is my cousin Brett. Okay, so I haven't spoken to him for 10 years. And then we started doing this unit, and I thought, really I should ask someone Indigenous what they think about closing the gap. So I called him up and I found out that he no longer drinks and smokes the green stuff all the time. Changed his life, went through the door. That picture at the top is him afterwards, and he reconnected with his country and people. So the first thing I asked him was, what do you think about closing the gap? And he said, well, what do you think it is? And I answered him and he said, well, I think it's assimilation. I was really surprised at that. The WDLAC that I've put up there is a big group of Western Desert mobs that came together, and they have a big land claim in, and they make submissions to the government, and but they're having a lot of arguments at the moment. After he went through the law, he changed his occupation. He's now a cultural competence officer, actually, and he goes around to the mining companies, talking about all the stuff that we've been talking about in this unit, with mining people so that they can connect with the Aboriginal people. The question I put about economic decisions I'll come back to, but the thing that he said to me about closing the gap that I mentioned first about assimilation was, he said the government are going to provide the money, but what's going to happen is the Wadjala, which is the white people, are going to get sick of handing the money out, so closing the gap's not going to stay around. He said it's going to be people like us making sure that the issue of closing the gap stays relevant for the money to stay there, which is kind of what we did in the lecture earlier, a little bit. We covered that. So after we talked about that, I told him a bit about the stuff that I was doing, and he said the the money should go to the non-government organisations who are doing the really cool stuff. So not Follow the Dream. Follow the Dream works, but it does segregate the Indigenous kids after school into a group. Over at Mount Morley Road to my crack, they have an Aboriginal Excellence Program. So Indigenous kids get tested to see what their ability is, but it's a different type of testing to what other students in the government system are tested on. It tests their ability to think, problem solve, that sort of stuff. And their big program means that they've got lots and lots of Indigenous kids. And I spent Friday, luckily, working for AIM, which I think last week's group mentioned. Now AIM stands for Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience. If any of you ever get the chance to be a mentor, go and do it. It's really awesome. Last Friday, we had like a big group. I think we had 100 students all together, and we spent the whole day with them. We see them 4 times a year only for the whole day. Not this Friday gone, but the Friday that we saw them before. We talked to them about drugs and alcohol. We would have heard me mention one day in the lecture that I was talking to them and connecting about going to visit people, relatives in prison, that sort of thing. At the end of that day, the girl that I was mentoring stood up and shook my hand, and she said, "Miss, I never knew white chicks had so many problems like you." And I just kind of went, "Oh." She said, "Well, I thought they were just Indigenous problems, these kind of things." And so it kind of changed her perspective on, you know, her view on what white people do. That they were her words that she used. I was just kind of, she told me she didn't like being called Indigenous as well. She liked being called Aboriginal. She was from up north. And so I just respected that. The Friday just gone, I had a student that I'd had before, so I had the same girl, but I also had 2 students that I had done my prac with in my class, and one of them is completely literate, doesn't really write. The other one's really shy. I got the illiterate boy to write a letter to someone that inspires him, and the next time that we meet, the kids don't really know this, but all those people are actually coming to the session that they've written to. And the girl who was really shy did the most, I'm going to cry, she did the most amazing Aboriginal artwork that I wish I had it shown, had pictures of turtles and everything on it. And she sat there and talked to me about where she was from, Kununurra, and then stood up and shared what her picture meant to this group of 100 people. She wouldn't put her hand up in the classroom the whole time that I was teaching her, but programs like that, they really do make a difference. The stats for AIM are much higher than Follow the Dream, and I think that we need to do stuff like that to close the gap, and the government should allow, you know, non-government organisations to apply for funds to be able to make them better, you know, reach more kids. I think all over Australia, we deal with 2,000 Indigenous kids, but that's not enough. There needs to be more than that. So that to me is how we close the gap. We do things like that. The other thing is I'm an ITAS tutor at the university. That you guys can all do that next year if you don't have a job. You get paid for it. Indigenous adults, they get to university, and all of those things that we've been learning about, they learn exactly the same as they did when they were 15, when they were 5. The person that I'm tutoring, he reads for me, but he doesn't kind of get it. He's doing media, so he had the camera, and I said, okay, I'll read out the instructions to you. I read them individually while he had the camera. He used it once, and now he's an absolute whiz. He's been around the city making movies and doing all this stuff. So we have to keep that in mind when we're teaching Indigenous kids. I think, like when I was talking to Brett, that's what he said we have to do. He said, start a conversation. Okay, it's easy for me to pick up the phone and call him, but that Aboriginal lady that you see as you're going into the shop, smile at her, you know, and if she doesn't smile back, don't worry about it. You have to give people new experiences to change their mind about things, and the only way that that's going to happen is if we start a conversation with people, a conversation, you know, body language, smiling. You don't have to say, hi, how are you going, you know, how's your day going, because you wouldn't say that to someone else, but smile. Don't walk around, you know, walk past them and smile. And if they swear at you, just do it again and again and again. That's what's going to make a difference. That's what he said. And he's also told me that there's no way that, like all the legislation and all of these things, they know that the money helps, they don't trust it. It's just the government giving them another set of rules, another set of things that they have to follow, and he doesn't like it. I don't know if you guys want me to read this out, but these are the two things that Brett said to me that really stuck with me, and I think when we leave this unit, we're going to not remember all of those acronyms and all that stuff we're going to put in our exam next week. It's these kind of things. The only way we can fix the problem or the gap, if that's what you want to call it, he said, is to do this. Our people on both sides need to find what we have in common and use these things to make connections. We need to interact outside of politics. He said he doesn't trust politicians, none of his people do, and we've got to learn from each other. He said, remember, we're all just people. Racism comes from perceptions and limited experiences. Everybody suffers from it. So we suffer from it, Indigenous people suffer from it. We're missing out on so much that we can learn if we just stay this way. And he said that if we work together, we can have new experiences and change people's perceptions. Most important thing, obviously, is to start the conversation on the smallest level. Hopefully you guys go out and do that. The AIM program, not the last time we met, but the time before, I had a boy called Jaden. I'm going to ask you all to do something now. We're going to watch Jaden's speech as the first Indigenous Prime Minister. He took 2 hours and he planned out this speech, and they're all online at theotherelection.com.au, okay, because it was running while the election was on. He's made it to the top 100, and I saw him on Friday and he came running across, he got out of the bus, he's like, this, I'm second. He's second in Australia for his speech. So I want you to all go online and vote for him, please. He's like really tall and he's just the most amazing kid. He's a really good role model. He said to me, I want to be a role model for my people. And he was, you know, telling the younger kids to settle down and stuff. And they listened to him. So we're going to finish off now and you can watch Jaden's speech as the first Prime Minister. And hopefully you go vote for him. Thanks a lot for staying back, you guys, and giving up your time for us. Thank you.
I, Jaden Durant, take great honour in becoming Australia's first Indigenous Prime Minister. As a proud Indigenous man, I will take great pride in enforcing the following values for Australian people. The continuation to provide a good education, provide a good health system for everyone, and equality between all races in Australia. Australia at this point in time is a multicultural society that has a lot of holes in it because as a society we are all not treated equally, and this affects us as a nation trying to better itself greatly. By providing an education to everyone, Australia will be taking a massive step forward as a nation. I recognise that our health system is flawed and I will work to make it one of the best in the world because every human being is entitled to good education, good health and a right to be happy. I also have a vision to protect the Aboriginal land as it is very sacred and is not being treated correctly.